you that um, when you are speaking, I want to remind you all that even though this is basically just a Q&A, I would also like to remind you that if you would like to please comment or question each other's opinions or experiences, feel free to do so. And then afterwards, after the discussion, we have our guest speakers. We have two amazing guest speakers who will be joining us here tonight. And then after the guest speaker part, we will have our wrap up and reminders. Next slide, please.
Before we get started, I just want to let you know a little bit about the Minority Freedom Community Fund. We were founded in 2019, and our mission is to improve the lives of African Americans and minorities in the United States of America through a multifaceted approach that includes providing capital infusions, supporting existing social infrastructures, and promoting holistic wellness.
So, as I stated earlier, my name is Catalina Macero Young, and I will be your co-moderator for tonight's forum, along with Ms. Nakia Powell Thomas. And the two guest speakers that we have joining us tonight are Layla and Aaliyah Crawley, who will be representing their campaign, Girls for Grace, as well as Ms. Jessica Ross, who will be representing JR Counseling, which is based in Michigan. So now we're at the part of the discussion, and first of all, I wanted all of us to start off with a question that could make race a bit more personal, which is why I encourage you all to answer and speak up about your experiences. This is a safe place and this is a forum for you. And as a reminder, we will be repeating these questions twice for those who are unable to see these slides. So the first question is, when was the last time you made a friend who didn't look like you? How did you meet and what did you learn about them? When was the last time you made a friend who did not look like you? How did you meet and what did you learn about them?
I can answer the question. Well, first, my name is Ava Peoples. I'm a young African American, and this is my answer. I said that the last time I made a friend that did not look like me was when before COVID started. I made a friend named Alex, and she's also a teammate on my volleyball team. And Alex is biracial, although she doesn't really look like me that much. We still have a lot in common, like we both like math, playing volleyball, and reading. And even though some people don't look the same, they can still be a lot alike.
Mm. Thank you for that. Thank you for your answer, Ava. I have a similar experience to talk about, although the lesson may be a little bit heavier. In my experience, um, I'm a senior, by the way, and I'm Asian Latina. And so when I was in ninth grade, I made a friend who was Black, and her name is Amira. And Mira and I, we could talk about all kinds of things. We became very close, and we talked about, video games, normal stuff that friends would talk about. And one of the topics that we talked about one day was about Black hairstyles. And before, I did not know a thing about Black hairstyles or their history or their significance. But after talking to Amira, she explained to me how important those hairstyles were to her and her family. And she also explained to me like that the history of Black hairstyles, unfortunately, it's not as great as some of you might be aware of, in terms of like Black people being discriminated upon because of their hairstyles. They won't be hired for jobs and things like that. And I never really realized this or knew about this until I had met my friend Amira. So that is one experience that I would like to share about a friend I made who didn't look like me. But does anybody else have a story that they'd like to share?
I'll go. Hi, this is Kayla, and I identify as African American. And when I made my friend, I was in the 5th grade, so it was last year, and she was Muslim, and she was wearing a hijab, and she explained to me the reasoning behind that, and I thought that was really interesting.
Kayla, I want to ask you a question. Did you ever find any similarities between you and your friend, or was it just like all differences, or like what did you find similar between you two?
Well, we both like helping kids because we were both we met in the service squatting program, so we both like helping kids, and we were both in the same grade. So we saw each other in classes a lot.
Okay, that's nice. Thank you for sharing that, Kayla. Does anybody else have any story that they'd like to share?
May I please go?
You may.
My name is Savannah Hilaris. I identify as African American, and wait, can you guys hear me? Because my speakers are kind of bad.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sometimes people tell me that my mic doesn't work, so I'm so sorry. Anyways, I go to school in a mostly European area. So I actually hang out and talk to a lot of kids. With I've pretty much met all oh my god, ethnicities. But in this one case, I'll go with a person that I met named Kai. He was European and he lives in the UK. One thing that I learned about Kai is that he was a bad influence, and I learned what I wanted in a friend from him because he didn't he didn't live in a he didn't live in a world that I wanted to be in. He did many things that were illegal, and I didn't want to be a part of that. So I learned from him my values.
Thank you for sharing that, Savannah. Can you tell me about what values that you learned, that you wanted, that you realized that you wanted in a friend or just in yourself?
Some of them were I don't like when people lie to me, and I don't like when people make jokes that are very rude or racial based.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing, Savannah. We really appreciate that. Does anyone else want to unmute and respond to the question? No? Okay, so I think we can move on to the next question. So the next slide, please. So our next question is, how did your school treat the topic of race? And how do you think it affected the way you viewed and learned about race? How did your schools treat the topic of race? And how do you think it affected the way you viewed and learned about race? So this question is open for anyone on the call. Does anyone want to respond or answer?
I do.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So I identify as African American. I am a college student at Western Michigan University. And we are constantly having the talk about the topic of race. I'm a music student, so we are currently trying to figure out how can we incorporate learning different styles of music without it being appropriation. And so what we've done is include the Black Student Union and the Office of Diversity into our lesson plans to help us better learn properly the styles from around the world.
Awesome. I have a question.
Mhm.
Have you found any difficulties with doing this? Actually incorporating the different types of music in the different organizations? Has it been challenging to do that in your music program?
It actually has. This past semester, we did a concert that celebrated spirituals, and we had a huge backlash from one student who didn't like the fact that because Western is a predominantly white institution, they didn't like the fact that it was predominantly white students singing the spirituals, and they thought it was appropriation. Thus, it caused a whole uproar on social media. So we have that's which is why we included all these different offices in, and we actually have our own board of diversity in the School of Music now to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Marcel.
I actually have a question about that. So like how does your school try to I guess try to put in like how do they try to approach the concept of appropriation? Like, is there a method that they use to say, oh, this is culturally appropriate, but like this is not cultural appropriation, but this is, and like, blah blah blah.
Yeah, so it's actually they haven't even found a solid way because it's a very thin line between appropriation and appreciation.
Hmm.
But they have in place a little, it's like a survey system
Hmm.
between all of because there's really only five of us in the School of Music, so we have to go outside of our major for other people of different races to get these results. And so that's what they've done so far. It's nothing has really been solidified.
You know, personally, for me, I find like cultural appropriation is such a slippery topic. Like, it's so difficult because I remember there was this blow up in maybe a year or two ago on social media about this girl. She was white and she attended a prom with a traditional Chinese dress, and it blew up on social media because on one half people were saying this is cultural appropriation, and then on the other half people were saying no, no, she's not being culturally appropriate. Like, this is appreciation. Like, why do you all have to get worked up about a girl wearing a traditional Chinese dress? Like, it's it's nice. It's not. There are so many other things we could focus on besides that. And so, personally, I think it was fine. I mean, like, I feel like sometimes for certain situations, I don't like to even state my opinion because it's like, is it a culturally appropriate or not? And it's just so hard, and it feels like, for your case, like as a music major, it feels like it's also like a little more difficult just because, um and it's also difficult, but like kind of in a sad way because music should be a language that everyone should enjoy. That's how I've seen music, as like a language everyone can enjoy. And now we have to, we've come to a point where we're saying we're policing it, and how we and what musics that we can you know
I I
do or
feel the
not.
same way. I feel the exact same way. I even brought it to the attention to the boards. I was like, and a number of us that are in the School of Music, we were like, we don't see it as appropriation. This is literally in every School of Music's curriculum to learn about spirituals.
Right.
But as soon as we did it, there was an uproar. So now you're sacrificing our learning because of something that could have been handled differently.
Can I actually respond to is it Catalina?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I certainly see where you're coming from in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to looking at like world music, for example, thinking about how we interact with music from other cultures and how we just how we engage with them. And you should be able to enjoy music that you hear, like if you go to India, you should be able to enjoy music that you hear when you go to Jamaica. You shouldn't be afraid to enjoy those kinds of music, those different kinds of music. And so I agree with you in that way. But I sort of think that when it comes to the conversation of like appropriation, for example, Black people feel like there's an appropriation of their culture in a lot of ways when it comes to music specifically, because a lot of music that we listen to today, not just hip hop and rap, were inspired by Negro spirituals. And so I don't think a lot of times, I don't think the Black community doesn't get a lot of the recognition that it deserves for being the catalyst for much. I mean, they actually have built charts that show you from when, like how Negro spirituals were started from traditional African dances and traditional African music, and those types of things over time help disseminate and help create things like classic music, and they help create things like hip hop, and they created classic rock, like things like that were all inspired by traditionally African music. So I kind of understand where that where it was coming from, especially if you have a group of students who who were enjoying the music but weren't appreciating it, weren't appreciating its history, weren't appreciating, weren't respectful of, who wrote it, or where it came from. And so that's where I actually disagree with you, where you said that like music should be something that everyone should just get to. You should be able to enjoy whatever you want, but if you're enjoying something but you're not appreciating it, and you're not appreciating its history and what it took to even be able to bring a court, like to have a chorus, a choir that's singing Negro spirituals, I think that that's wrong. And so I agree in some way that that student was justified.
Thank you for telling me all of that. I don't know, I really appreciate that. Your opinion, and that would definitely inform me of like of just like the differences between having music to enjoy and also appreciating it. One moment though, we do have a comment in the chat from from a woman named Jessica Ross, who is our guest speaker. It is important to remember that part of the difference between appropriation and appreciation can be acknowledgement, being informed, and awareness as it relates to the source. Now, I definitely agree with what Ms. Ross said. Personally, like when I speak about cultural appropriation, I was not just speaking from a musical standpoint, but like I definitely see where you're going. What's Miss Sydney? Was that your name?
Yes, my name is Sydney.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said, Sydney. I know you just spoke about it 5 seconds ago, but it really is like it really was impactful what you said to me.
I'm glad.
I want to make sure that we all, and we appreciate your comment, Sydney. This is a safe space and everyone has a right to their opinion. And we want to make sure that everyone has a voice. It's okay. Like sometimes it's for clarity and sometimes it just might be a difference of opinion, but that's what things are like this for. This forum is for all of the youth to speak. So feel free to engage, to give your opinion. There's no negativity here at all. So I definitely appreciate all of you on the call.
Can I also just one last thing, and I'll try to like just
no, take your time, please.
But no, I just wanted to say one of the I want to say I don't know the general age range of the people who are here, but I go to the University of Michigan. I'm a senior at the University of Michigan, and like I said, I don't know go blue. I don't know the age range of the people who are here, so I don't know if people are younger than me But what I will add is that, I mean, to what I think it was Nakia that was just speaking, is that if some of you are not in college already, or in middle school or in high school or however, or even if you're an adult and these are things that you're uncomfortable with, having forums like this is really, really important. But more so important than having the forum is learning skills in how to engage with someone when they don't agree with what you've said. So I think that's, like I said, I don't know the age group, so I don't want to be talking to a bunch of adults telling them that, but sometimes it is adults that need to hear it. So yeah, so I agree with Nikki. I really appreciate you creating this space for youth to learn those types of skills if they haven't already.
Absolutely. Is there anyone else that wants to unmute and answer the question? How did your schools treat the topic of race, and how do you think it affected the way you viewed and learned about race?
I would like to
I
answer
would
the question.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yay, okay. So how about, can we get one person? Did someone unmute?
Whoever, I'll go after you if you want to go first. That is totally okay.
Okay. Let's go with Cortland, and then we can, if you raise your hands, then we can just call your name if you're able to. But is it Cortland?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, go right ahead, Cortland.
Hi, my name is Cortland. I am a sophomore in high school, and I am Black. And my middle school, I went to a predominantly white Catholic middle school, and I didn't realize how much racism was in the foundation of the school until Trump was elected. And I think everybody in my class felt it was like a free for all when it came to race, and like you could say whatever you wanted to and it was okay. And also I think the way my teachers taught about civil rights, like they basically kind of coached us into believing that only Martin Luther King was the only person who fought for civil rights. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks were the only two people who fought for civil rights, and that and that slavery was like a lot shorter, like a shorter amount of time than it was. And it was hard even for me as a Black person to actually kind of come to reality, and that what they were teaching us wasn't really true. And they also treated race, like when people were racist, just blatantly racist, they would treat it as bullying instead of what it actually was. And I think that a lot of schools have that problem. And yeah, like one time my one of my classmates took a picture of my stepmother, who is Black, and at a school event, and he called her, he said she was Rosa Parks with dreads, and he was suspended for 2 days. But we never really talked about race, and the class never really got together and or the school never really got together and talked about race, which is what I think we needed at that time. And so, yeah. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you for sharing, because I think that we need to hear that on all levels. On the call, it's all you. So there are college students on down. And I think that there are many experiences, and we should share them. And I think I don't want to prepare us for experiences like that, but we need to hear about them so we can know. And I truly understand what you were saying when you said that after the election, people were more vocal. And I definitely agree with that it was more, people decided to speak more about how they felt, or just decided to speak on it as well. So it's unfortunate, but I totally understand. So thank you for sharing that with us today. We definitely
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. So I think our next speaker with the hand up is Savannah.
Hello.
Go right ahead, Savannah.
Yeah. So in my school, like I said, I went to a predominantly European school. My school kind of ignored it a lot. For me, and it there was this kid in my class that went to school wearing a Confederate flag shirt, clear as day. You could walk past him and see it. It was so big, like it covered. It was on the front and the back, so you could, no matter what direction he was turned, you could see it. Teachers saw him wearing it. Students saw him wearing it. Everybody saw him wearing it. Nobody did anything. My history teacher, for God's sake, my history teacher saw him wearing it and said nothing. He didn't go to the office. I think that even the principal saw him wearing it. Nobody said anything. And so I realized that day that in my school, nobody cared about racism like that. And I'm like, do you guys know what the Confederate flag stands for? Like, that's just awful. And I made the conscious decision within myself to not let things like this bother me, because I'm gonna have to deal with it for as long as I'm alive, and I might as well learn the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lesson of things go, because my life is too short for me to be holding on to everything.
Absolutely, Savannah. Absolutely. And along with that, I just want you to say, although you said that to not let it bother you, but forums like this where you can speak about it and you can educate others is very important. So we appreciate you sharing your feedback. The next person I have is Mackenzie.
Hi, I am biracial. My mom is Black and my dad is Caucasian. I go to a white majority middle school, junior high, and the topic of race has never come up. No one ever says anything about it. No one at all. And the thing, I forget who said it before, I'm sorry, but the person who said that the people at their school were talking about how Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks were the only people who stood up for racism. That was also a thing that came around during Black History Month. Never really mentioned anything about it. No one really even, no one made a point to say anything about racism or anything that was going on in school. So I know a lot of minorities in the school feel like they're being um, denied knowledge that they need and help that they need. I also know that people in my school, like some of the teachers, kind of discriminate when people wear ripped jeans or anything like that. If a Caucasian student walks down the hall in them, they completely ignore it. And if an Arabic or Asian or Black person walks down the hall, they immediately say something about it. So I feel like people are ignoring it and yet still being racist. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Mackenzie. I really appreciate your thoughts and your opinions. Layla, I have Layla next with her hand raised.
Hi, I'm Aaliyah Crowley, Layla's sister, and I wanted to answer this question too.
Absolutely. Hi, Aaliyah.
My school, they wanted to like embrace my middle school. I'm gonna go to I'm gonna be a ninth grader this year. And they kind of embraced it because it was predominantly white, but there was also lots and lots of like South Asians and Asians, so like lots of Indians and stuff. But there was also like 1% Black. So they talked a lot about diversity because like my school really tried to be like the top of the top. They tried to like address all these topics and we would have like discussions like every other week about how to like be better and how to like diminish bullying and like respecting others' views. But like some of the stuff that they were doing weren't all efficient. Like they in seventh grade, they got together all the Black girls of the school, and we had like a group. We had a meeting. I think like twice a week to just like talk about how we felt, like being like with there being so few of us there, and like how we were feeling and how we were being treated. And it was ran by a counselor. She was a white woman, so it was hard for her to like lead it, not exactly knowing like she can't exactly, you know, like relate as much to us. But the girls, it was good for most of them. And for most of us, I'll say like to just get together and like kind of bond, because like we shared like our grievances and like any like microaggressions that we like found. But it still wasn't exactly, I didn't feel like enlightened after walking out of there, but they did put in an effort. And I also want to address like people were, it's like out very suburban, and people aren't openly racist like that, but they also like, I'm just going to bring up my experience from my 8th grade trip. We went to DC, and like we're allowed to, like, you can buy like all the merch you want, you can buy like shirts that say Washington DC. And so I was just so surprised by so many people who picked up Trump hats and Trump sweatshirts and shirts. And you could like see our group, and it would be like 70% of it is just like wearing red, bright red, you know, the merchandise. And I'm like looking back on my pictures and stuff, and I'm taking pictures with my friends, and it's like messing up my pictures. Like I don't want to be associated with all that. And I'm like, wow. And then even after the trip, like you walk through the hallways and all you see this, and it's just like it, you kind of see your friends differently when you know that's how they feel, this is who they're supporters of. And it just like kind of shaped how I viewed things and stuff.
Wow. Thank you, Layla. We appreciate you.
I was Aaliyah.
I'm sorry, Aaliyah. We appreciate your comment. And before we go on, I just want to say that meetings like these in all levels of school is very important. And although you had a white counselor during that period, I appreciate how you got together with your other peers and continue to have conversations on your own. When I was in college a long time ago, very, very long time ago, I attended the University of Michigan, and I came from a predominantly Black school. So it was definitely an adjustment going to Michigan. And we have community bathrooms and community halls. And my roommate and I both are African American. And what we noticed is when we came down the halls, doors would close. So before we got there, doors were open, music was going, people were free, coming and going. And in the bathrooms, when we would come in, everyone would walk out. So our dorm resident director had a race forum similar to this one, and we had it in one of our meeting rooms. And it was eye-opening as a freshman coming from a predominantly Black area, because at partway through the meeting, a young lady stood up and said, you can have as many meetings as you want. You can't force us to like certain people. You can't force us to talk to certain people. And some of us have never even seen a Black person. So, and you can't force us to sit here. And a good number of them got up and walked out. So it was very emotional, because we sat and we cried. And then we got over it, and we started having our own meetings. We started having meetings in our Black halls, in our unions, and we built a rapport with each other. And of course, there was some students who didn't agree, who were not African American, who didn't agree, that stayed and spoke with us, but it's a reality. And I think at some point in all of your lives as youth, you will get hit with the reality of what's really going on and how people really feel. So I do appreciate all of your comments, and it's continuing, because I was in school a long time ago, and just to hear you all are still going through the same things, it's just heartbreaking. Okay, so before we move to the next question, is there anyone else who wants to respond to this question?
I would like to go.
Okay, go
Hi,
right.
this is Kayla. At my school, it is a predominantly white school, and it's an elementary school, so we don't um cover the topic of race. We don't speak of it. It's not in our lessons, and when it is in our lessons, our history is just about slavery, and and they make it as like that's the only thing that we have done in our past. And for my other friends, that's basically what they're going to believe, because that's all that they're being taught.
Absolutely, I understand. Okay, so we have, okay, is there anyone else that wants to speak? I see the Minority Freedom Community Fund, and Aaliyah already spoke. So after you speak, so please make sure that you take your hand down, but feel free to unmute and speak as you like. Okay, so I think Catalina will go ahead to the next slide.
Thank you all so much for sharing all your experiences. That was really sad, and it was just very very impactful. So now I would like to move on to the next question, and the question for those who can't see the slide is, how do you think your school or parents could help you develop a deep, critical, and inclusive understanding of your own and others' racial identities? How do you think your school or parents could help you develop a deep, critical, and inclusive understanding of your own and others' racial identities? So I know there's many big words in this question, but this is sort of piggybacking off the previous question. If you've had rough experiences, you've had rough experiences with your school, how do you think they should fix it? Or how do you think your parents should be able to teach you about accepting your own and someone else's racial identity? And someone has raised their hand. Cortland, would you like to go?
Yes, hi. So I think the previous school I went to, not the school that I go to now, the school that I go to now has lots of forums like this and stuff, which is really awesome. But I think the middle school that I went to needs to begin holding people accountable for racially based comments, and instead of calling it bullying, calling it what it is, and which is racism. And I also think that like it really just starts in school. Like I saw this video about how in there was like a Georgia textbook about slavery in like 1964 or something like that. And like kids were learning from this book for like decades, and it basically taught slavery as if it was like this great thing that Black people were just having fun and like enjoying themselves. And I really think everything starts in the schools, and the fact that I've learned more about Black history and just everybody's racial history since George Floyd died, that I've learned in all my years of schooling, is a little bit ridiculous to me. I feel like I've been cheated out of really and truly being in school and learning about people's experiences and learning about minorities' experiences. And I think that we need to have more classes, and the teachers, they need to bring in people on the outside, and I just think that we could just do a whole lot better, especially in, I mean, especially in private schools, because like private schools, they're not controlled by the state. And I just think that, yeah, that's, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely agree with you that, you know, a lot of youth participants or a lot of youth people in general, like, most of what they've learned was because of a black man dying or like in during that period of time from then till now. And I think that's so ridiculous and stupid and very, very wrong. So I definitely agree with you about schools being able should absolutely incorporate these elements like this youth forum or an opportunity for people to learn more about minorities. Um, so does anybody else have an opinion that they'd like to share?
Feel free to unmute.
Oh, sorry. I'd like to go. This is Kayla. So for the school, I think maybe having, like acknowledging, BIPOC like history holidays, like maybe like Black History Month, we could talk about like, more than Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King, maybe talk about some of the other history we have. And for parents, I mean, maybe enrolling in programs like the Pretty Brown Girl Club and the Minority Freedom Community Fund, like enrolling in programs could help. Learning about it on the holidays, like the school, and I think that would be really important.
Thank you for sharing that, Kayla. I think those suggestions are definitely something that schools can do a lot more to incorporate. Definitely. Um, so does anybody else think they'd like to share something? They can unmute yourself or you can type in the group chat.
I'd like to say something.
Okay.
I mentioned before that I go to a predominantly white school, but we do have a black principal, and she doesn't talk much, but I feel like she should maybe come up to the school and explain to them what is wrong with how people treat racism and how people treat history of all minorities. And like Kayla said, Black History Month and things like that. I know personally in my school and the school that Kayla goes to, we haven't done any Black history projects, gone over Black history since third grade, and no one mentions it. And even if they do, it's brief and it's the same thing every time. So I really feel like if people don't want talking about minority and race to be so uncomfortable, then they need to share knowledge so everyone knows what really goes on and so people don't feel uncomfortable with the fact that they don't know anything. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I absolutely great points you just made. Absolutely. So are there any other, anyone else who wants to respond before we go to the next questions? You can just go ahead and unmute, but we will continue on.
I guess I'll say something.
Sure, go ahead.
My name is Jackson, and I identify as African American. And at my school, they don't really teach anything about Black history because really they think that we're going to be offended about what used to happen. But other than there's nothing really that they teach.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Jackson. I totally understand. So it's like a double-edged sword. So they don't say anything because they don't want to be offended. And then when they say things, they have to make sure they get it right. So totally understand. We have a comment in the chat, Kayla.
Yeah, we have a comment in the chat from someone named Sarita Darby, and they say, Mackenzie and anyone else, what are some strategies? Um, what are some Actually, since for the sake of time, we'll move on to the next question, but we will definitely address this question at the end. But just for the sake of time, we'll move on because it is nearing 8 o'clock.
Okay, so I will go ahead and we'll see how many more we can get through because we do have three great speakers that we definitely want to get to. So the next question is, what are some examples of prejudice behaviors have you seen in your community or schools? How might you help shift the conversation? What are some examples of prejudice behaviors have you seen? What examples of prejudice behaviors have you seen in your community or schools? How might you help shift the conversations? Feel free to unmute and speak if you would like to answer this question.
Hi, this is Kayla. Um, so I do have a story about a prejudice behavior. So, like I said, I was in the service squad program at my school where we helped out in the little kids' classrooms. And there was a little boy, and he was like all alone. And I thought he could use someone to play with. And I asked him, would you like to play with me? Because I see that you're not with anyone. And he said no. And another service squad saw him as well, and she asked him the same thing, like, would you like to play? And he said yes. And then I asked him, well, why didn't you want to play with me when I asked? And he said, because you're black and we're all white. And I thought that was really hurtful, because if that can start as little as 5 years old, that kind of prejudice behavior will only grow and grow and grow as you get older. And how might I help shift the conversation? Well, we did inform him, like, we had to explain to him that wasn't right. We just had to explain to him that it wasn't right. So explaining, like, how your opinion and how some things aren't acceptable.
Thank you for sharing that, Kayla. I absolutely agree. Are there any other, anyone else who wants to respond to this question?
I'd like to,
Yes. Oh, okay, go ahead.
you can go.
Okay. So, this is Savannah Hill Harris speaking. So in school, there was this one time where I really wanted to be promoted, meaning like graduated early to a different grade. I wanted to be in 9th grade when I was in 8th grade. I was told by the school that they don't promote anymore because they don't. Well, the same year I met a girl that was my age and went to a school that's nearby the school that I go to, called Carleton Middle School, and they promoted her. And when I asked the high school that I was going to, because I wanted to be promoted all classes, I was in 9th grade math and I had 8th grade other classes, and I wanted to have full 9th grade classes. But when I asked Cousino, they said, which is the high school that I went to, they said that they did allow it and that I basically missed out on the opportunity to be graduated, basically be a full-term high school student that year. So I wonder why I was basically lied to before, when I was in 7th grade and asked. I wonder why I was lied to. I was basically cheated out of an opportunity to have high school classes the next year because I had the grades necessary, having all A's, that's pretty awesome, and I would think maybe people will want me to be in a high school class, but I guess not.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Um, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Savannah. You know, when I it's really crazy to me to think, you know, in this day and age, like 50 years after the civil rights, not even 50, more like 70 years after the civil rights, or maybe 60 after the civil rights movement, that we still have, you know, prejudice and and racism going on in institutions like schools and things like that. And it it's very I can describe so many words, but it's very sad, and just it doesn't it makes me very sad to think about. And so I want to thank you for sharing that experience. And so, does anybody want to share anything quick to this question? It is 8:04, and um, we are near half an hour away from 8:30, and we have guest speakers to get to. But does anybody before that would like to share some examples that they've experienced?
I had one thing to say.
Go right ahead.
This wasn't me, but it was a friend of mine who I saw it happen to. This boy, Muhammad, was in my class in fourth grade, and he came into the office every day for 2 weeks telling the front desk lady that his sister was being bullied on the bus. Muhammad was Indian, and he had moved here, and every single day the lady said, "No, it's fine. It'll blow over. It's fine. Nothing's happening." And every single day for 2 weeks, he kept saying, "No, she's being bullied. They're being rude to her." And his little sister was in like kindergarten, and they kept brushing him off. But I know for a fact that if a Caucasian student, which I had seen before, had came into the office saying someone said something to him, and even if it was just a one-time thing, they would immediately take that person and bring them into the office. I know because I've seen that happen before, and I feel like, how could you brush someone off because they look different? They're being bullied, they're being harmed, and at such a young age, it can be detrimental to their emotions and how they look at the world. And I feel like that was so rough and rude, and to blow someone off because they look a little different was just so, I don't even have a word for it. It was awful.
Wow, Mackenzie, thank you for sharing. I feel the passion, and I feel the emotion in all of your stories, and just want to let you know that, you know, your opinions and your emotions and how you feel definitely matter. And even though you are youth, it's very important that we adults and your peers know that as well. Like, you make a difference being young, and these things do, like you said, Mackenzie, they do impact your childhood and your growing. So if there's not anyone else who wants to respond to this question, we will move on to the next question.
Um, for those of you who identify as a person of color, how do you think people of color should support each other? For those of you who identify as a person of color, how do you think people of color should support each other. Would anyone like to share? Just unmute yourself or even just type it in the chat box and we'll read it out loud for you.
I can answer. So again, my name is Ava, and I identify as an African American. And I feel like one way we can support each other, even though if we might be black, or if we are black, and there, there's different shades of black. Like you don't have to be mixed just to be light skinned. Like there's different shades of black and different ethnicities of black. So one way I feel like we can support each other is by not looking at the color of our skin, but who we're on the inside and not who we're on the outside, and just looking at the positive things about ourselves instead of looking at the negative ones that they might not like about themselves.
Thank you for sharing that, Ava. That was really sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, because of the time constraint, I wish we could get to everybody's opinion. If only we had more time, or I don't know, but
That's
for
fine.
now, we
Yeah.
will just limit every question to one comment. So
We have one comment in the chat, so we'll read that one before
Yeah.
we go to the next one. Layla and Aaliyah, it says, I believe we as people of color should try to spend our money within our own communities whenever possible. And I definitely agree with that comment. I definitely believe that when we have the opportunity to support each other, to encourage each other, we should. And I think that's one of the things that we lack. I'm not saying to just buy just because we're Black, but when you have a good product and there's a good service, or just try to look for a service or a product from our own first, because if we're not supporting each other, how can we expect anyone else to do so? So I definitely agree with that. And I see a lot of people in the chat who agree with that comment as well. So yes, very powerful. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question. Where do you think racial issues will go in the next 10 years? Do you think they will improve, worsen, or stay the same? Where do you think racial issues will go in the next 10 years? Will they improve, worsen, or stay the same? Feel free to unmute. I see Courtland's hand up. Courtland, is your hand up for this question?
Yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
I think racial issues will improve because I think it's becoming more difficult to. I think you can be racist and like hide, but I think it's harder. I think it's becoming harder to be explicitly racist and to state your opinion as a racist, because like, I mean, all of our social media, all of the TV shows we watch, or most of the TV shows we watch, our news, are like it's all like done that with people of multiple races, of multiple genders, of multiple sexualities, all like it. And so I think it's becoming more difficult to just like just to be racist, and I think that's really good, because the flow of information, and like with music, like how we talked about music in the first part of this session, like I just think it's going to be harder to be racist. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't see any other comments in the chat and no other hands. And you guys are doing such an amazing job sharing your responses and your opinions. and I really don't even want to end, but we do need to get to our speakers. So if we want to move on to the next slide.
Okay, so some people see racism as solely a black versus white issue. What role can you play in bringing about racial unity, even if you don't identify as black or white? Would anyone like me to repeat the question? And for the notice, even if you are black or white, you can definitely answer the question. But yes.
This is Wei.
Oh,
Can you hear
yeah.
me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wei, and I am Asian. I think okay. So the issue with racial justice, I think, is really important for every person of color to just be empathetic, because like even though that's honestly the reason why we have the term BIPOC, is because like we don't even though as minorities we do experience oppression, but our oppressions are not the same level. So I think it's just like really important to know that other people's experience like might be different, but we still need to be on the like stay on the same team. For example, with the with all the Black Lives movements, a lot of backlashes are actually coming from other minority groups, like including Asian Americans, because like they still like see it as an excluding like other people of color, and it's just really important for people to realize that like um that like we're just like different. Some people are like oppressed more harshly by the system than us, so it's just really important to be able to emphasize and understand that.
That was so good. And as someone who identifies as Asian Latina, I 100% agree with you. um, next, could you go to the next slide, please?
How can biracial and multicultural people support discussions of racial identity, awareness, and/or equality? How can biracial and multicultural people support discussions of racial identity, awareness, and/or equality? Feel free to unmute and speak if you like.
I can share.
Sure.
So I think that racial identity, I think that that biracial people can do this by explaining their racial identity and by sharing their own personal stories, experiences, and if they're comfortable with it though. And this can help bring more perspective to race relations and understand that we're all different in our own ways. And we all have our pros and cons, and we might not like stuff about ourselves, but we should.
Thank you, Ava. Thank you very much. As we move on, I just want to read this one because I thought it was really good from Mackenzie. It depends on how we tackle our racial problems. We can't change people's opinions, but if we try to broaden their view and give them knowledge, they might change their opinion on their own, and racial problems might cease to exist. So I really agree with that. I had a conversation with my own daughter, and we were having the conversation because sometimes you just don't want to walk away, and sometimes you just don't want to get frustrated. Sometimes you have to stop and you have to educate, and you have to share your knowledge, because sometimes people are just ignorant and they don't know. But if we don't at least try to share our wisdom and educate them, then we won't be able to make things better. So Thank you for that comment, Ava and Mackenzie. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. How have recent events, COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, shaped your view of how people of color are treated in the US? How have recent events such as COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement shaped your view of how people of color are treated in the US?
I'll go.
Go right ahead.
Well, definitely for Black Lives Matter, I believe that it's really bringing out the negative of the racial issues in America, because it's really showing. I mean, Black Lives Matter was meant to eliminate all of the racial injustice going on in the world, but I feel like it really is creating a lot of problems, because you see a lot of issues, but everyone means well and it's supposed to eliminate. And for COVID-19, I can't really say much about that for people of color, but definitely for the Black Lives Matter movement, it is showing me how these injustices really are in America.
Thank you for sharing, Kayla. Really appreciate you giving your thoughts. Okay. I don't see anything else in there, so we were going to go ahead and move on to our next question.
What do you think we can do to involve ourselves and others in supporting racial equality and racial justice movements like Black Lives Matter? What do you think we can do to involve ourselves and others in supporting racial equality and racial justice movements like Black Lives Matter? Since no one is speaking, I think I'll express my opinion for this. So I guess I speak. Oh, no, wait. Someone already. I would prefer to read their comment aloud. So Cortland Barrett said, using social media as an advantage, reposting information, spreading links, etc. Yep, that is the power of the youth, and definitely anybody who uses social media. But I just wanted to quickly say, especially towards non-Black minorities, um, you know, some of the best ways to involve ourselves is to understand why Black Lives Matter was created, and also understand that, as stated before, the levels of oppression for different minority groups are different, and that does not mean it's just because a movement that was created solely for Black lives, that doesn't mean that it's invalidating your experience if you're a non-Black minority. It just means that this is an issue that is at the top. Like, we should focus on it right now, because it is something that is affecting a group of people more, so harm, like, the worst, is what I'm trying to say. So that is how I think non-Black minorities should help involve themselves. But next slide, please.
Okay, so I believe, is this our last question?
Yes.
Okay, so this is our last question. How do people feel about returning to school in the current environment? What would make you feel excited about back to school? How do people feel about returning to school in the current environment? And what would make you feel excited about back to school? Feel free to unmute if you would like to respond to the question.
I'll tackle it.
Go right ahead.
Um, I feel about going back to school is going to be extremely stressful, just because of the current environment that we're in with the whole Black Lives Matter movement and the COVID situation weighing on people's minds and emotions. Um, I know that's the truth for me personally. Making going back to school more exciting. I guess COVID not existing anymore, but overall, it is what it is.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you for that. So that was our last question. I just want to thank each and every one of you on the call for speaking and sharing and giving us your opinions and your emotions and all of the comments in the chat, including the adults. You guys made this a great discussion and we really appreciate it. So I am going to turn it over to Catalina because we still want to get to our speakers and we're really excited about that.
Okay, so yeah, you can move on to the next slide. But as I said before, we have two amazing guest speakers. Now, since we are running on a time limit, on a time schedule, I will ask these guest speakers to limit their comments to 10 minutes. But just welcome Aaliyah and Layla Crawley from Girls for Grace, and they'll be explaining their campaign and what they're fighting for.
Hi, everybody. My name is Layla, and this is Aaliyah Crawley. And we started Girls for Grace about a couple weeks ago when we found out about the 15-year-old named Grace, who is in Oakland County, and she was on probation and got arrested and sent into a detention center for failing to do her homework on probation. And we felt that that was an unjust act and racially motivated. So as soon as we heard it, the first time we heard it, our father had told us, and we thought we had become desensitized from the bad things that were happening to Black people. But the next time we heard it, which was a couple days later, our mother explained to us the story, and it really settled in, and we felt the gravity of it. And then we decided that the next day, and even if there wasn't one, we were going to attend a protest or start one to make sure that we got our voices heard out about how wrong this was. She's my age, she's 15, we're both 15, and we're both Black, and I realized that could have been me. So I would want somebody to do that for me. And so she's like my sister. And so we attended protests and we started a website called Girls for Grace where it would provide updates on her case and provide a place that people could donate so we could get her therapy or anything else she financially needed, and also petitions that people could sign. And we really got the word out. And it was around July 31st that she had been in the detention center since May, but the story had just gotten released late June. And July 31st, she finally was released from the detention center, which is really good. And just 2 days ago, she was finally off of probation from earlier causes in late last year, but nothing major. And yeah, so she's finally off probation, and the judge has terminated her case, which means they're not involved anymore. And yeah, that's our story.
Yeah, there were two protests set up. The first one was like a caravan where we like met at the school, and there was a big gathering. We were surprised to see all the people that showed up because the first article that had ever even talked about Grace, and it just came out the day before, and there was already a big showing, a lot of people together, and people had put signs, and they were writing free Grace and justice for Grace and words of encouragement. And we were just expressing ourselves on their cars. And we drove to the detention center where she was being held in the courthouse in Oakland County and Oakland County. And we had chants, and we just, it was beautiful to see all these people come together and support Grace. People spoke. There was a woman who she had been incarcerated herself, and she felt for Grace, and she knew that we couldn't let this happen to another girl like it had happened to her. And it was moving, like the people there speaking, it made me tear up, and it made me feel like we couldn't give up on her, even after it seemed, because later in the case, after the protest, she had a hearing. They scheduled a hearing for her after like all the commotion we made, but her judge denied her, Mary Ellen Brennan she denied her her freedom, and it just pushed us to fight harder. And we knew that we couldn't just sit idle while this was happening, like right in our community.
And the news coverage went globally, and her case, her story was reached out by CNN, MSNBC, and we were on BBC and a lot of local articles, and it was just really something that will affect us, that is really significant in our lives forever. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you both for that. That is amazing. I followed your platform, and I am just very proud of both of you. And it's just awesome. I just want to say that all of you, like, you matter, you make a difference. And I truly believe, and especially after your platform on this, is you guys are the future, so you are the change. And it's just you are role models to our youth to show that you don't have to get to a certain age to do something about what's going on. So thank you both, and keep doing exactly what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
We will.
You're welcome. So we're going to move on to our next slide and our final speaker. And we have Jessica. I'm just going to quickly read her bio so it can make sense why we have her here. Jessica is a psychodynamically trained, nationally board certified licensed professional counselor, and she specializes in therapy and trauma. She also has advanced training in health, psychology, forensics, investigation, and psychometrics. Her practice, JR Counseling, is in Sterling Heights, and she specializes in using a biopsychosocial approach to care. Through her work, she spends a lot of time engaging with cultural aspects that influence people's experiences and ability to seek treatment, which allows her to work effectively and improves client efficacy. Jessica's work also allows her to be a consultant for various programs in Michigan. So we asked Jessica to join us today because we want to hear what she has to say on race, youth, and mental health, because a lot of you shared a lot of emotions and a lot of passion, and we just want her to want to hear what she has to say. So Jessica.
Okay, are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you, Jessica.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I really appreciate you all inviting me to this forum. I will be brief because I know we are at our time. But I really was able to sit back and appreciate all the views that all of the youth and some of the adults were able to present. This is a heavy topic, and it can be really difficult to have this conversation. It's a really high level of vulnerability to talk about your experiences and to be able to sit with other people in theirs. So I really do applaud the level of empathy that you all were able to show here in your various age groups and walks of life. A few things that I want to say. The topic of race will be a never-ending conversation. It will be one that you face throughout your lifetime, from microaggressions to things that are very overtly racist and in your face. So one of the things that, or a couple of things that I want you to keep in mind, as you all are going through this, make sure that you are embracing self-love and self-care. It can be really hard to balance how the world is treating you, how they want you to see yourself, how you're trying to see yourself, all of these battles that some of you are in terms of fighting for, fighting against racism, fighting against things in your school system, fighting against things in the county system at your ages. And so really embracing that idea of what does it mean to love me? Whether the world loves me, whether they're able to embrace my skin, no matter the color of your skin, what does it mean to love you and to fall in love with you and to fall in love with your culture and your identity and to know what that means to you so that you're able to speak effectively about it, but also to be able to support yourself when times become a little bit difficult. So self-love is important. Self-care is an important piece of that. And it's really just, we hear self-care a lot, but it's really just taking a moment out to say pause. I myself had to take time out during the last couple of months because with the George Floyd murder, the Breonna Taylor, and all of the things that were flooding down the timeline, it was just hard to sit in it all day because you have it in your personal life. Now it's paraded in front of social media and television and news, and you're anchored in it all day. So it really is okay. I want all of you to know that if you all need breaks, if you need to take a step away, if you need to turn off the TV and the social media, it is very important to take that time and to recalibrate. You are not doing anything against your race or against or helping anyone out in terms of the opposition. Opposition was not a good word, but in terms of this systematic racism and some of the environmental racism that you all are fighting against. So please make sure that you're caring for yourself. The other thing is community care. Community care is really important. Yes, take care of yourself, but also find people that will support you, people that have the same beliefs as you, people that you can call when you have a rough day and you can just sigh or you can just hold the phone and they'll be okay. They'll be there for you because they understand where you've been through. The other thing I would say is be compassionate. Again, yes to the world, but also to yourself. This is a very heavy fight. And again, the longevity of it says that you need to take care of yourself in the midst of it. In terms of how do we address diversity and inclusion? How do we talk about race? How do we bring those conversations to the people around us? How do we have those conversations and be effective and not alienating? You want to be curious. Be curious about other people's perspective and where that comes from. Be curious about how they see themselves, so that when you're speaking, you can speak effectively to not only what they are saying they believe, but also maybe some of where that comes from. So the wrap up here, and what I would say really hold on to, is provide yourself with some empathy and some love. Provide yourself with a really good means of creating a support system around what is happening. People you can talk to, forums like this one here, but also smaller, more intimate forums that you can access on a day-to-day basis. And make sure you give yourself that opportunity to just breathe. It's really important for you as a BIPOC to or non to be in a space where you feel comfortable, where you feel like you can embrace all of you and where you don't have to hide you. So embrace you, provide yourself some compassion and empathy, and provide yourself a little kindness when you feel fatigued.
Thank you so much for that, Jessica. We really appreciate you. We appreciate you coming on to speak. I appreciate you as a friend and a person that I can call on as well. So I just want to thank all of the speakers, Layla, Aaliyah, and Jessica Ross. But I want to give a special recognition to all of the Minority Freedom Community Fund's Youth Committee that worked really hard putting this together, and everyone who shared their opinions and thoughts just to make this a great forum. Yes, you can go to the next slide. And I want to especially say thank you to Catalina. Catalina, you did an amazing job putting this together and being an awesome moderator. So want to especially thank you for that. Before we end the call, just want to talk about a couple ways that you can get involved with the Minority Freedom Community Fund. You can always hop on a community call. We have 2 task force calls twice a month. You can go to our social media pages to find out the dates of those calls. You can also text My Fund, the word MYFUND, to 44321 to support our mission if you want to donate to all of the wonderful initiatives that we have. You can join the Minority Freedom Community Fund's Youth Advisory Committee. As you can see, we have an awesome committee. We have wonderful youth that are tackling great big adventures. We do have a urgent need. The Minority Community Response Emergency Aid During the pandemic, we have been giving grants to those in need. If you know someone in need or want more information about that, please visit our website. But if you would like to donate, you can text COVID Fund, COVIDFUND, to 44321 to donate or fundraise. And we also have a Cash App, which is MIFRREDOMCF. Cash App is MI Freedom CF. So thank you all again. We really appreciate you. We appreciate this time. Just before we get off, you can raise your hands. How many of you would love to have a part 2? I know we rushed a little bit at the end because everyone has so much to say. Do you actually think that we should do another forum? Would you participate in another forum like this from the Minority Freedom Community Fund? You can raise your hands or unmute if you like. I'm just curious if you would want to. Oh, I see. Look at all the hands. Okay.
Yes, this is so good.
Awesome. Okay, great. And we didn't think about that, but we definitely want to continue to feed into you. Catalina, do you want to be the last voice before we end?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nakia. Could you move on to the next slide, please? Yes, thank you so much, everybody, for participating, for sharing their experiences. This was my very first race forum and my very first time co-moderating, so I was so nervous, but I'm so happy that this turned out well. I hope you all leave with something today, with a view that you learn, like I learned from Cynthia. And I just think thank you all so much. And I also want to thank everybody who helped prepare for this forum, all you youth advisory members. I know I got onto you for this, but now you see why, because I wanted such a good experience for all of us. And also I want to thank all the adults who helped, Miss Dana Peoples, Mr. Damon Allens, you, Nakia, and of course, Taquayan. I can tell you that the Minority Freedom Community Fund is such a great organization because it's built on a foundation that is based on such amazing, hardworking, and passionate people. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you all so much. Thank you for participating, and I hope we come back with a part 2 because I really enjoyed this myself.
Have a great night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Great job. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.